I am someone who knows what it's like to be a chronic overthinker. In fact, in my past, I would say it was my #1 obstacle. But now, a lot of people actually comment on how quickly and decisively I make decisions. It did take me a long time to get there though. So I know how terrible it can feel to feel like you need to overthink everything. Like it will somehow increase your chances of survival, or worse yet, that really bad things are going to happen if you don't overthink everything. This kind of habitual impulse to overthink everything harms us in multiple ways. The first is obvious, it's stress and anxiety. The more we overthink everything, the more mental energy we are using, and the more we are using our own minds to essentially attack itself by overthinking every thought that our mind has. The second is mental fatigue. I'm sure you can relate to having overthought something or a collection of things so much that you just end up exhausted. The third is a lack of action. Because you're so stressed and so anxious and you're so mentally fatigued and exhausted, oftentimes we just end up doing nothing. And likewise, just the sheer act of overthinking can leave us with no decision made at all, which means no action taken whatsoever. This not only results in decreased productivity, but also completely missed opportunities. Another effect of overthinking is that it distorts reality. When we overthink something too much, we can actually end up distorting the very reality that we are trying to understand. And with a distorted reality, we end up making poor decisions. And finally, as a result of all these things, as well as others that I didn't mention, overthinking can lead to a lower self-esteem. But before we get to the action steps on how to stop overthinking once and for all, let's start by understanding why we overthink in the first place. One reason that we can tend to overthink is because of a fear of failure. When we are afraid of failure, or we have some insecurity inside of us, or some wiring in our brain that is telling us, hey, we might fail, hey, we will fail, then it's natural for us to start overthinking everything, because that overthinking becomes sort of a protection, self-defense mechanism that our ego creates to protect us from the inevitable failure that our mind thinks we are going to reach. Overthinking does this in two ways. Number one, it makes you overthink to the point that you take no action and therefore never fail, even though not taking any action is a kind of failure in and of its own. And number two, that fear creates anxiety that leads you to overthink everything as a way of trying to stay alive and trying to think of every possible little thing. But in reality, we can't actually think of every little thing, but we don't understand that when we are in the act of overthinking. Another reason that we can overthink is due to information overload. In today's day and age, we have so much information being constantly thrown at us all the time. Interestingly, a series of studies titled "When Choice is Demotivating" actually found that more options can be worse than less options. One of these studies set up two tables with jars of jam, and they gave the participants a $1 coupon to buy some jam. The first table had 6 different jars, whereas the second table had 24 different jars. Now, the table with 24 jars attracted more people, but people tasted the same number of jams at each table. What's more interesting is that only 3% of people that were exposed to the 24 jars actually bought some jam, whereas 30% of the people that were exposed to the 6 jars actually ended up buying the jam. There's a few theories why this happened. The first is that with more options, we have to put in more effort to actually make a choice, thus making the choice more difficult to reach. The second theory is that more options, again, equals more effort, which makes the actual purchase less enjoyable. And the third is that when we're presented with so many options, the option we end up choosing ends up being less satisfying because we are reminded of all the other options that we didn't pick. And additionally, when we have so many options with so many different features, there might not be one option that has all the features we like. And so we never end up picking one option that has all the features that we liked, and we have to pick some option that has some features that we liked, but because we were exposed to all these other features, our choice just ends up reminding us of the features that we didn't get. There's a really good book called The Paradox of Choice, which talks about this and other studies. That is a really good read. Another reason that we can overthink is, ironically, information underload. So while we don't want to have too much information overloading our brains, we still need some level of information to make our decisions. And if we feel like we don't have the necessary information to make a decision, then we feel uncertain and we feel a lack of confidence in reaching that decision. And because we're missing certain pieces that we would want to make that decision, we end up overthinking as a way of trying to fill those gaps that we're missing. So we want to find the sweet spot between not enough information and too much information. Piggybacking off of that, a fourth reason that we can overthink is because of a lack of self-confidence. Self-confidence is just another word for self-trust. And when we don't trust ourselves and our ability to make decisions, we end up overthinking everything. A good way to combat this is to remember that small wins build momentum. And so when we want to build our self-confidence and our self-trust, we don't have to try to build a skyscraper all at once. We just want to create small wins and build momentum with those small wins. So for example, we don't have to go to the gym, eat healthy, go to sleep on time, and do all these things all at once. We can start little by little by little by little, build small wins, and then use those small wins as momentum for medium-sized and big wins. Now, with that increased self-confidence, we're less likely to overthink. And finally, a fifth reason that we can overthink is due to a lack of clear, defined goals. If we don't know where we're going, we don't know what steps to take. When we don't know what steps to take or where we're going, we tend to overthink everything because we don't have any roadmap whatsoever of where to step. And so when we want to go somewhere, but we don't know exactly where it is that we want to go or what the steps are to get to that place that we want to go, we end up overthinking everything to sort of fill those gaps that we've created by not having clearly defined goals. And now the final part of the video, which is the action steps to finally stop overthinking everything. The first is my favorite one, which is to make action a habit. This was something that was really hard for me to do because every time I was overthinking something, all I wanted to do was overthink more. I essentially wanted to overthink my way out of overthinking. And it took me a long time to realize that that was just making the overthinking worse. And so what I had to do was force myself, when I caught myself overthinking, to just stop and then take some form of action. It didn't really matter what it was. It could have been picking up a book and reading it. It could have been going on a walk. I could have been going to the gym. It could have been anything as long as it was some form of action that got me outside of my head. In fact, going for a walk and exercising is actually a really good way to stop overthinking because you get outside of your head and into your body. But it really doesn't matter too much what it is, as long as you stop the overthinking and just start doing something. Start doing something that moves you closer to your goals. Start doing something that you keep telling yourself that you want to do, but you keep putting it off. The moment that you start overthinking, do those things. Move your body, do something that gets you closer to your goals, and over time you will make that a habit. That will be your default that you go into every single time you overthink is some form of action, and that action will slowly over time eradicate the overthinking pattern. A second way to stop overthinking is to seek an outside opinion. When we're overthinking, we're in our own heads. When we're in our own heads, one of the best things we can do is to get outside of our head. Now, I just mentioned how exercise can be a good way to get out of your head and into your body, but another way to get out of your head is to get into somebody else's head by talking to them. Oftentimes when we're overthinking something, we don't recognize that we're overthinking it. And when we talk about it to somebody else and they say, "Hey man, you're really overthinking that one. You need to chill," it makes us kind of go, "Damn, you're right. I should stop." And then once you're out of your head and you see it from the outside, it gives you a new perspective and it helps you stop the overthinking pattern and do something else instead. The third is to practice meditation and mindfulness. This is something that I do every single morning when I wake up. I stretch and I meditate and I do deep breathing exercises. And when I'm doing these, I try to focus on my breath. I try to focus on making my breath as still and as calm as I possibly can and as controlled as I possibly can. And I try to focus on my breath, making it slow, calm, and controlled. I do this for about 10 to 15 minutes every morning, and I've noticed that when I do it, I feel like I'm in control of my day, and when I don't do it, I feel like I'm chasing the day. A fourth way is one that is pretty difficult when you're in the middle of overthinking, but it is to practice objectivity. Focus on facts, proof, and evidence. As a lawyer, when I'm overthinking something and I recognize that I'm overthinking something, I go, okay, I need to focus on the facts, the proof, and the evidence. And then I pretend like I am in a courtroom talking to a judge or talking to a jury and explaining my position to them. And oftentimes when I'm overthinking and I try to explain my position to those people in that imaginary world, it becomes very difficult to explain my position, and it makes me realize I'm overthinking the crap out of this. So you can put yourself in a situation where you're explaining your position to others, the position that you're overthinking, and when you realize that you can't really explain your position and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, it just sort of hits your brain that you're overthinking, and you just sort of stop because it seems so ridiculous now that you've gone through an exercise of trying to tell other people about your position that you're overthinking the crap out of. And finally, the fifth way is to gather information, parentheses, to a limit. As we talked about earlier, information overload can be terrible for making decisions and it can lead to overthinking everything, but information underload is also a reason that we can overthink. And so we want enough information so that we we can fill in the important and vital gaps that we don't want to have when making decisions, but we don't want to give ourselves too much information because that's going to overload us and it's going to overwhelm us and it's going to make us overthink every little thing. And so we want to find the sweet spot of gathering the necessary and important and vital information to make a decision so that we have the sweet spot where we don't overthink the crap out of it. Now, if you suffer from overthinking, chances are you suffer from perfectionism, which is something that I myself have also suffered from for a large portion of my life. If you want to check out the video that I made about that, you can click it right here. And as always, if you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more of it, click the link in the description down below to sign up for my weekly email newsletter where I send you content like this every week, every Monday via email to get you started for the week. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.